You know, I'm kind of insulted how you guys said that my topics take 45 minutes to discuss when, like, there's 4 of us, and I just take the starting heal topic. That's all I do.
Yeah, and like generally when it comes down to topics, you only need one topic because your topic's going to take the longest amount of time typically.
Oh, content. Look it up.
So you had a topic. Oh, right. But we're the Grumpy Dungeon Masters. I'm Jay. We're joined with Christopher and Kristian. Dan is actually on vacation at the beach or something. Lucky shit.
I've been to the beach. It sucks.
I don't know. Okay, yeah, it kind of sucks. I don't like sand. I don't like sharks. Yeah, I don't really like the beach.
The sand.
It gets in everywhere. Anyways, who are we and where can they find us?
That's not my job.
We just said that we were the Grumpy Dungeon Masters.
Right. Where can they find us?
You can find us wherever you get your podcast, be that Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or some other random place that does podcasts. You can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on various other social medias that we're mostly silent on because you guys don't do anything with those.
Mm-hmm. I got an email in the mail today. It was from Spotify. Or it wasn't from Spotify, but it was someone trying to get me to buy their services. And they're basing their findings off of what they could find via Spotify. All right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so it's one of those.
Yeah.
And I found it very interesting because it had a couple of categories where it had our rankings. And this is a person from a service. And according to them, we are number 9 on Apple Podcasts for the keyword of Dungeon Master. Number 30 with lore discussion, and number 38 for Critical Role. On Spotify, if you search for Dungeon Masters, we're number 10. If you search for Dungeon Master, we're 25. If you search for Game Mechanics, we show up as 171st.
Okay.
Yeah.
That 170 are probably all Magic the Gathering ones.
Maybe, yeah. But it's just funny, like, we can boost that even more and get you in the top 10. Like, there are so many podcasts out there. And we're just one of thousands. And kind of probably what you want to talk about a little bit later today is that one blog service that is no longer existing. Or maybe wait for Dan because he's the one that found it.
We can talk. We could talk a little bit about it at the very least, but yeah, I don't want to go too in depth on it because I'd never even heard of it and I haven't had enough time to research it. So
yeah, I want to do more of a digging on it too.
There is so much out there. It's just hard to find exactly what you're looking for sometimes because it can just be so buried in the smorgasbord that is all of our content. But you know, the fact that we have content out there on the internet makes us the Time 2014 Person of the Year or 2004 Person of the Year or whatever it is.
Blessing and a curse.
Yes, blessing and a curse. Nonetheless, I did have a couple things to talk about real quick. I've been running through the GaryCon Adventure League modules and my Adventure League group.
Okay.
And it is one of the most written pieces of work out there. And I don't want to be negative about it because it relatively is a creative 4-piece adventure. All right. Essentially there's 4 adventures, each take you through, finding a giant that was a part of the original like rebellion against the ordering. And
the ordering.
Yeah, the ordering. And you're supposed to either rescue or reinforce the prison that these giants are in. And there's not enough context in the adventures to really kind of say if anything negative will happen if you leave them in there or free them. but you do know that negative things are happening because the prison is there. Okay.
I mean, you're the game master. Isn't it your job to figure out what will happen if it's not written for you?
Well, that's the thing, is these 4 adventures. First one, you free Hill Giant. The second one, you free a Storm Giant. Third one, you free a Stone Giant. And the fourth one, you free a Fire Giant. So you hit all like the major parts of the ordering except for Cloud Giant. And there is no finale piece to these things. You just get into the module, fight a bunch of stuff, fight against the negative effects that are happening from the giant prison, and that's it. There's no solution. You get all these like benefits of like, being friends with giants and shit like that, but there's no conclusion to this. And I don't think one was ever made to be written. They kind of mentioned that, hey, once you're done with this, you can just go play, Storm Giant, or you could play Out of the Abyss or something along those lines. But there's no real connection to any of those. I'd have to make one. I have to go out of my way to make a conclusion to the story, and that kind of annoys me. Like, there should be like a 5th document that's the conclusion to this little story that they're starting.
I mean, they could have something like that, but I don't feel that's necessary. No, I'm just saying they could put something together like that. I know that doesn't exist, but I don't know. From my perspective, I don't run people's stuff usually, other than like Dungeon Crawl Classic stuff where they are literally just one-off modules. But like I actually got the Caverns of Thracia this week in the mail. And I start going through this thing, and from what I knew about the Caverns of Thracia, it's just a mega dungeon. And when I get the book, and it's a fantastic book, by the way, but it is literally just a mega dungeon. But there is a lot of information in that dungeon. There's a lot of different organizations and groups who are trying to play against each other and everything. And this dungeon is set on an island. That island, the game came with a full fold-out map of the island, hex grid, with, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of locations. And none of those locations, other than where that cavern is at, have details. Nothing. And I was excited about that, because I get to build that. I don't need them to tell me this. I can do it myself.
I think this is the where you get that difference in philosophy. Like Chris came up through 4th edition and 5th edition, where it's been very much like, we're going to tell you all the stuff and you just have to run through these paces. Whereas you and I are much more accustomed to, hey, both of us tend to run our own stuff and not tend to run written stuff by other people. We tend to make up our own, like, that's just always how I've done it. It started out when I was a kid, when I first got into this, like, I just couldn't afford to go buy a bunch of modules.
Yeah,
I didn't have my money to get the core books, so I was like, well, I can just make it up myself, and that's kind of what I always did.
Yeah, and let's be very clear. There is no wrong way to do this. Like, I'm not, poo-pooing on, the other method of doing it. It's just not how I've done it.
Right, but I think that's where you see that kind of, you get people that are used to one method, and these could go either way, but like if you're used to having everything kind of spelled out and written in detailed, where you don't have to create it yourself, when you run into a lack of information, it's kind of disconcerting. You're kind of it throws you for a little bit when you have to say, well, there's no details about this. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
In the same way, if you're used to building everything yourself, when you get we have put all the details for you in this, and there's nothing that you need to come up with to run it, you're just kind of like, I'm kind of bored.
Yeah.
So my issue with this one in particular is I have issues with how the adventures are structured. And I'll get to that in a second. But the main problem that I have is that you presented to me these 4 modules, okay? They start at level 5 and they take me to level 10. But there's no end part to the story. There's no conclusion to the story. Now, if I go look at Storm King's Thunder, I can and have already found kind of like the appropriate path to take to conclude the story. Essentially, Storm King's Thunder is a lot of you got to get the Giant's favor, and once you get the Giant's favor, you get a quest to go rescue the Storm King. You know, I'm leaving out a lot of details, sans spoilers for the decade-old module. And there's an ending to that, and there's a multiple kinds of endings to that story, and that's great. That's exactly what I would want. But these don't lead anything to it, especially with AL. You're not technically supposed to be running anything that's not AL approved.
Yeah,
so,
except they don't approve anything for AL anymore.
No,
it's
they
just
approve
run what you want.
Everything for AL.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just it's kind of run what you want these days.
Right, but this is supposed to be different because it had some of the leadership involved in it. Okay, so you run this module, you free these 4 giants from their eternal prisons. You make this big deal that these giants are of the like original flock of giants that ever existed in the world and been here for centuries. But then you don't do anything with it. You just kind of like hand wave it off to the other hardcore books. Now, if that was the intent, then tell me where on the hardcore books I should pick these things up. Because it looks like there is kind of like a little bit of a logical place where they would go for Storm King's Thunder, at least. But at least tell me that's where this story concludes.
To me...
Yeah, go ahead, Kristian.
Jay. To me, this is a benefit, like that they're not telling me how the adventure ends or is supposed to end, because that means I can choose. I get to write that based on what my players did, not based on, hey, this is whatever they do, like this is where you're supposed to go. And even the adventures that lead, like, hey, there's option A, B, and C. Like, to me, that still feels restrictive. I like the open-ended of, well, you know what your players just did, so you create the ending.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, is that AL really isn't structured like that, because you really shouldn't be focusing on having the same players every week, even though that's the way it turns out to be. So you need to be able to kind of like have that kind of story conclusion where you can bring these people to and have them fight that monster of the week. Like I said, I have a pretty good story with a little bit of finagling to kind of figure it out and get it completed. But it just...
You're expecting too much from Adventures League. I mean, you realize they more or less wrote that off a couple of years ago. We've talked about it several times on here.
I know. But...
So the fact that you got 4 modules that were specifically for Adventures League, I would be happy about that. The fact that it didn't have a conclusion, suck it up, write it yourself, move on. You got something at least, which was more than you've gotten for several years.
And the other thing is that one of the players that I have coming out brought me all of his old stuff from the beginning of Adventures League in 5th edition. Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of really cool stuff. And basically what they used to do is they used to send out these like information booklets and packets that had all the stuff you would need to run their modules or their storybooks. And you would actually have documented items. So like if I gave you a +1 greatsword or some shit like that, there would be a +1 greatsword card I could give you. So you could then turn that into your character sheet and prove to the DM at the next table you play at that I do indeed have these items.
Right. Yep.
And it had like a unique ID number associated with them. Like, that's pretty awesome. That seems like a worthwhile group to be a part of. But
yeah, that seems like they were actually supporting it back then.
Yeah. So it just kind of makes me sad, but I, in our private discussions, I have already basically figured out what I'm going to do to resolve the problem that I'm having. And I'm not going to say what it is, but
yeah,
I got a big mini to paint. That's all I got to say.
Well, with a little bit of luck, maybe within the next year or two, we'll have the Shadow Dark Adventures League, and maybe get some real support there.
I hope that they do have that.
I mean, Kelsey, she did talk about it something she would love to do. So
I did get a chance to look at the Harbor Master program for Pirate Borg, which is pretty neat. Like every time you run a module, you get like an accumulative point score, and then with that, you can buy unique stuff from their Harbor Master store, so you can kind of run games better for them, and that's kind of neat. I don't know if I'm going to jump into it because I don't think anyone's going to play Pirate Borg all that often, but we'll see what happens during free RPG day.
If you start running it at your store every week, people will play.
Yeah,
if you play it, they will play.
Yeah. There tends to be more players than DMs, so if you're offering to run something, people that want to play games will be like, okay, sure, this maybe is not what I thought I was going to play, but you know what? At least it's a game I get to play.
Yeah. Like I said, the free RPG day, we'll definitely see what happens, because I got a lot of DMs coming out to run the games they want to run. We got one guy running 5th edition stuff in full. I'm going to running Shadow Dark and Pirate Borg. I have another guy that's going to run Shadow Dark stuff. I have one guy that wants to run some DCC stuff. And I am going to do, like I said, Pirate Borg and Shadow Dark. So we'll see what happens. One guy is going to be playing his own unique D6 system that he's trying to make. Called Goblin Party or something like that. I'm all for it.
Yep.
Have some fun. Play test your game. So we'll see how that all shakes out, and I kind of hope that we get a good crowd for that.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah, the other thing is that the last one that I ran, the one where they rescued the stone giant. I don't know if you guys have ever come across this, but the guy literally wrote half a page. So, like, how like the D&D pages have like the 4 columns on it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, picture one whole of those columns, just exposition text describing the room. Okay, and then let the players make a decision on something, and then another half a page of descriptive text describing what happened when they made that choice.
That sounds like a lot.
Aggravating. It was a lot. I just gave up. I'm not going to read that much text to my players because it's just not that entertaining. It's not that fun. I appreciate the creativity. It definitely shows that it's there. But I'm not going to read that much text to somebody. They're going to get bored.
Yeah,
and they're going to leave.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, descriptive text is nice to have when you're running a dungeon or introducing a monster. It's nice to have something, but you got to keep it kind of short and punchy. Like it should be maybe a sentence or two.
Yeah, paragraph, maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraphs at the most. You don't want a page or a half a page of text that you're having to read to your players. That's not ever going to fly.
Yeah, it was a little too much. And the best part is there's been a bunch of spelling mistakes, formatting mistakes, and a lot of that stuff I can just hand wave away because, it's not a professional piece, even though there was quote unquote professional writers on this one.
I mean, we saw Spelljammer's spine of the book misspelled. So,
like I said, the occasional problem with spelling happens. You can't find everything. Okay.
Yep.
You'll go insane if you try, and your thing will never come out. But what I found was funny in this one is the name of the dungeon that keeps all the giants in check is called. Let me spell it for you. All right, because I have yet to pronounce it correctly yet.
I mean, we already know you struggle with pronunciations anyway.
I'm great at pronouncing stuff. So I'm going to say it's the Berlivigart. Beerllivargt.
Hold on 1 second. Spell that once more for me. That way I can physically see it in front of me.
Beerllivargt.
ARGT.
Yep.
Yeah, Bear Livigart. That's how I would say it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the best I could. But I always mess up and read it wrong or different or whatever, as I always tend to. But so in the last document that I read, the guy that wrote like the pages and stuff, he did a control find and control paste on the document. And the reason I know this is he must have like had a tag word for what this prison was going to get called, and he didn't realize it till later what it was going to be called.
Yeah.
Because he tried to copy and paste that word over and over and over again. Well, in numerous places in his text, he just has the letter V in place of the name of the prison, the Belle Vigard. Okay, so it just says, and then a giant will be freed from V. Let the players know that V gets destroyed. Yeah. So my guess is that no one proofread these things.
That's I'm like, that's a pretty big spelling mistake. That's definitely somebody did not proofread this. Nobody looked at it after the first pass.
Yeah. So I found that very hilarious, just kind of like, oh yeah, well.
That's what happens when you edit and proofread your own text. Is like you know what's supposed to be there, so you just kind of mentally insert it instead of seeing what's there.
The problem that I have the most of is like I'll think of the sentence and like I'll know. I usually spend a little bit of time thinking of what I'm going to write before I write it down, and then I go to write it down, and I type too slow to my thought process, and I miss words. So like the quick brown fox jumped over to 5 lazy dogs. So it'd be the quick brown fox over the dogs.
Right, you're gonna.
And so I'm missing some words, and my hands are trying to keep up with that.
In the case of him using the letter V, like that's something I will do oftentimes. If I have some crazy ass long word I don't want to spell out when I'm in the middle of a writing process, I might use a placeholder thing there, and with the intention of coming back and removing it later.
So use the find and replace function of every single program that exists out there right now.
Yeah.
And it'll handle it for you, and you won't make the mistake of just typing V,
Yep.
So it was very weird that happened. And it was just like, There were a couple other, spelling mistakes or wrong words used and things like that. But nothing I would harp over. But I found the V to be very funny.
Yep.
So,
all right.
I'm struggling with the Adventures League. Like I said, I really wish they get to their next iteration of it, or I'll just start doing Shadow Dark or whatever. Because
I would have left that shit a long time ago and just been running what I wanted to run.
Well, I hate to do that because I'm doing it for the store first and foremost to drive the tabletop community, and I'm not going to try to drive Shadow Dark without.
I mean, you could have been running
backing.
You could have been running. Well, there's no backing. There hasn't been any backing at all. So, if there's no backing, run what you want to run because you're getting nothing for it.
Yeah, I know. But D&D still sells better than Shadow Dark. I mean,
you can run
as
D&D,
much as we love Shadow Dark. She's not putting the stuff in the stores, so I can't get people to buy the stuff from the store.
Yeah, it's still early. The game's been out a couple of years.
Well, you talked about that's because the way they do stuff with the stores is they want to kind of instead of putting it with a big distributor that kind of does race to the bottom prices and takes a chunk of their profit for themselves and then raises the price of the product. She does direct distribution, so get your store in contact with her so they'll carry the stuff.
No. I have tried. I sent multiple emails to get that to happen that way. I'm actually, running that program essentially for the store. It's just a slow process overall,
Yep.
So hopefully, we get the chance to do that. I'd love to have Shadow Dark in our store. As much as people like it, and as much I know that her product is great and people want to play it. It's just hard to get a hold of, from an LGS standpoint. But I'm trying to get it in there, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like you've reached out as in the official capacity of the store.
Yes.
All right, I'll poke at somebody on that and see if
Okay.
I can. Give me the contact info you use for the store, and I'll poke at somebody.
All right.
Yeah,
I mean, I want it in the store.
Oh, everybody does.
Yeah, everybody does.
That's still kind of beside the point. Like, if you're not happy with the way Adventures League's going, just run D&D your way. Don't harp on it. Yeah.
That's what I've kind of been doing. I've been kind of just running the game that I want to run, and I try to have fun doing it by running these modules from GaryCon, and they're okay. Not the best, but they're okay. They exist in a spectrum.
Yep. It's something. Yeah, they're not the worst. Yeah. So speaking of running games and everything, I did want to talk about the index card RPG that I picked up the other day. Have either of you got copies of this or looked through it at all?
I have a little
index card.
Okay,
I have a PDF of Index Card RPG that I got.
All right.
I haven't got the physical copy that I probably will at some point. But yeah, I've looked a little bit, especially since you mentioned you want to talk about it. I've looked through it some.
Okay. Yeah. So Chris, you don't have to use index cards. They barely even mention using index card. They talk about it at one single spot halfway through the book for like a quarter of a page. So
I don't know what an index card. Listen, I have some deep childhood trauma associated with index cards.
Oh, you can't.
It's got to be fantastic system to get
you can never. Yeah, you can never play D&D underneath me then, because I write all my shit on index cards.
You keep a ruler by your D&D stuff to hit players with it.
It's not the worst idea.
That's how you measure distance, though, in D&D. You got to have the ruler so you know how many inches you can move.
Yep. I do though. I like every monster I'm planning to use that night is written down on an index card.
I love it.
Yep, I've been doing that for decades now, and I still do.
That's fantastic.
So, it makes it easy for me. Yeah, it requires a little bit of work, but I'm going to have quick access to the stats. I'm going to remember the stats better. Oh, and my stat cards, especially with 5e or any of these, it's just the basics. It's not the whole stat block of all this garbage that I don't need. It's just what I'm going to need.
I know you hate D&D Beyond, but that's what I use D&D Beyond for. It just handles all that for me, and I don't have to write down on an index card.
Yeah, well, we do things differently, but that idea of it simplifies things is the actual point of index card RPG. So index card RPG is it's a D&D system that crunches down all of the rules to make it very simple, even simpler than Shadow Dark does. And if I was going to tell a new person who wanted to learn how to dungeon master anything, I would tell them start with this book instead of with D&D. So as an example of how it crunches down some of the rules, in D&D, you roll the 3d6 or you 4d6, whatever the hell it is, or point buy, etc. And you might have a 13 strength, you might have a 17 dex, you might have an 18 con, etc., etc. Index card RPG only cares about stat bonuses because that's the only thing you're going to be adding to rolls. So those other numbers for strength don't matter. If you have a 13 strength, well, in index card RPG, you just have a +1 to your strength. There's no 13 at all. Hit points are broken down into hearts, and I'm not quite fully keen on this idea. A heart in this game is 10 hit points. So if a monster they don't want you using 14 hit points or 18 hit points. It's just simplification, round everything into tens. But I feel that sort of dies when you actually start dealing damage and you're rolling a d6 and you do 4 damage. You kind of have to break the fucking thing up anyway. So
wow, that's 10 damage.
Part of a heart.
Well, yeah, a D6 won't do 10 damage. So yes, you effectively still have to keep numbers, but I like the idea of it. It's a simplification for DMs of just try to round things to tens if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a quick aside, I had an argument with my wife. She is notorious for not liking math.
Yeah,
so
I got players like that.
So basically, we had to round a number that was out of 4, and she goes, "Oh, okay, so it's 10." Like, no, it's a 4. You round that down. She's like, "No, you don't round down. Everything gets rounded up." It's like, no. If it's 1.1, it doesn't round up to 10. It rounds down to 1. She's like, no, it doesn't. And so I busted out Siri. I was like, Siri, what's 4 rounded up? And she's like, well, you said rounded up, not rounded. And we every time now I take that to yell at her and have fun.
Keep poking at her. Yep. They simplify inventory. You can carry 10 items. Pretty straightforward. So to hit numbers is another thing that's really kind of neat. So in D&D, every monster has its own armor class, right? All players have their own armor class, etc. In this one, they take every scene and give it a target number. So if you walk into the first room of a dungeon, the DM might say that the target number for this room is 12. So any armor class that you have to hit is going to be 12. Any checks that you have to make are going to be 12. So it makes it real clean, real simple for everybody. And as a player, sort of your idea is to figure out ways as well to bump that number down. So if you walk into that first room of a dungeon, there's no light, you can say, I light a torch. All right, now the target number for you might be 11. And the wizard might say, I cast a light spell. Well, now the number might be 10. So you can push it down that way up to 3 points in total. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I kind of like that because it gives you kind of a way to scale and let the players kind of know, because they'll know by the number, like, how tough is this thing that I've just entered in, and that might tell you how much time do I want to spend here. If this is a super tough area, we might not try to do everything. If this is a super simple area, we might try to grab everything that's in this room or interact with everything.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of it in that regard, but yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So
I kind of have the opposite thought where it will make it so that character uniqueness doesn't matter. Like, and I know that kind of already is the case in a lot of ways. Where like,
I mean, it is a rules light system, so that's already going to be kind of a thing. It's focused more towards the role play than the rules.
Yeah, and so what I find lacking with all these narrative based systems, and this is what it sounds like this is that it's really good for wanting to tell a story with your players, but if you want to build a character, it just doesn't have appeal for that kind of aspect of things. And well, that could be good, it could be bad, depending on what the player wants to do.
Well, you're kind of, so that's one of the big kind of divides here as far as old school versus new school play, and like building your character of how you want to do, and the kind of the Pathfinder way of like, I've determined from first, like when I first started, like before when my GM announced that we were running a game, I've already built my character to level 20. I know everything he's going to do. Is a way of playing that a lot of us older players just despise with every fiber of my being. Whereas this is the way where you kind of go, you don't build your character, you do things during the course of an adventure. And those things that you do earn you scars and hindrances and boons and blessings and abilities. And you build your character through playing them, not because you picked all the right options from the hundreds of options available in a book.
And I agree with you in that. I personally don't build characters, or when I talk to them, I don't suggest building characters that way. Don't look ahead. Things might change. But if I'm going to play a strength fighter, I'm going to be a strength fighter. I'm not going to min-max my strength fighteriness. but I do have an idea of what I want to be. If I want to play a berserker, I'm going to play a berserker. I don't want to start playing a berserker and then wind up becoming a paladin unless there's a really good story reason for it, like Final Fantasy 4,
But you can do that through play. If you want to be the strength guy, well, in the game while you're playing, do the strong stuff. Try to break down doors.
Right.
Enter into a contest of strength with that demon. Do
yeah,
that.
But I don't need to spec it out to level 20 to do that.
Right.
But then again, if I walk into a room and the DC is 12, all right, well, okay, I can do strength stuff. If the DC's 12, that's going to be pretty easy. Oh, the wizard made the room brighter. Okay, cool. Like, everyone can solve all the problems, so there's no uniqueness to the characters at all.
It's still up to the DM to decide what actually lowers the difficulty.
Yeah, that light may not help you lift that
gate. The light
gate.
may not help you if the challenge in that room is a heavy gate.
Yeah.
The wizard might, if he doesn't have some sort of telekinesis or anything like that, him saying, "Oh, I cast light," doesn't do anything for the challenge of that room.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know. I don't know that much about the system, so I don't know whether or not.
Yeah,
there's
it's
utility characters. But it just sounds like if you just build utility characters, you win.
No, that's definitely not.
It's definitely not the case with that. It does have there are certain things that it will suggest to you and things of like these are things that might help lower the difficulty.
So as far as character building in this, and it is pretty simplistic for the most part, but so there's 5 different settings, and every setting's a little bit different. I'd have to find the actual names of the settings in here, but there's a science fiction setting. There's your kind of standard fantasy setting. There is a Wild West setting that I actually do want to talk about briefly because it's really, really good. There's a superhero setting, and then there is an Ice Age setting.
Yeah, it's Alfheim is the fantasy setting.
Yeah.
And you have Warp Shell is the name of their sci-fi setting. Ghost Mountain, which I think is your Wild West.
Yep.
You have Vigilante City for your superheroes, and then you have Blood and Snow for your kind of Arctic survival.
Yeah, and for Blood and Snow, they tell you that's a lethal game. Expect to play several characters. But so you've got the paths that you can choose: the Path of Iron, the Path of Smoke, the Path of Amber, Path of Oak, and Path of the Hawk for the fantasy setting, at least. And each one of them, you get rewards at tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. And these are your kind of abilities, the cool shit you can do. So like Path of the Hawk, at level 1, elemental ammo. As you ready a shot, declare an element, fire, ice, stone, or metal. Your shot becomes this element, releasing that effect on impact. So there's different stuff like that. So you can kind of build a character, but you're never going to be in super, super in-depth levels of like what Pathfinder or Rollmaster would do.
Yeah, I will say that as far as you're talking about character building, there is actually options in here to actually build. Even like say your Path of Shadow has milestone abilities, and there's multiple options, so you can kind of pick your style and your kind of way to go. But they're all pretty light, but they do give you the flavor of the kind of way that you approach the world.
So you end up with, okay, so you're going to play the hammer. All right. So everything's a nail to you, and you're going to play the screwdriver. So everything's a screw to you.
I mean, you also have to think, Chris, this is designed for new DMs and new players. So it's not supposed to be super in-depth, super complicated. It just isn't going to have that level of difficulty.
But that's also D&D. When you're the fighter, the fighter in most D&D games is just the guy that sits around until there's combat.
Yeah. That isn't the selling point of this role-playing game. Fighter. So even for advanced dungeon masters like myself, like you guys, they're advanced. You are. I mean, you've been running for 15 years or something. That's pretty long time. But there's things in here that are still very useful for people like us. So there's things that we don't think about or we forget about at times. And it goes into a lot of detail onto stuff like that. The story architecture, and it breaks down, from point A to point, Z on how to put a story together and to run it. It reminds you of things of like, let's see, what do they call them? They refer to a couple of things in here. There's the 3 T's, which is timers, threats, and treats, which is, if you go into a room with a bad guy, well, there might be a timer ticking down, and at the end of that timer, something's going to happen. Then the threats are obviously the different types of things you have to deal with. The treats are, what you get paid out at the end. Then they've got the 3 Ds, the damage, disruption, duration. And these are all things that we as longtime game masters know, but don't always think about or can easily forget about.
Yeah, I will second that. Even if you don't want to run this system, like I think reading the kind of GM section is worth a read through of just some good solid reminders and good ideas just of how to do things as a solid game master or dungeon master. It really has some great advice.
There are 10 different encounter architectures that they go over, and I've probably personally run every single one of these, but I've never actually thought about them in as to what they are. Like the first one is just a barrier. Okay, that could be as simple as a wall in between where you're at and where you have to go. It could be a gorge, and it breaks down how this encounter operates. The tangle is another one where your players have to stay away from the edge of the walls or bad things happen. There's 10 different encounter types that it goes over that I've never even thought about, even though I've run them. So, yeah, that alone makes this book kind of worth having, because there's a good bit of that stuff in here on encounter architecture and how to build encounters.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the reason why I said, like, I have the PDF, but I want to pick up the physical copy, is not because I think that I'm going to run Index Card RPG as a game, but man, that GM advice section is nice, and having that there as a reference when I'm building something, if I just want to, like, let me look something here, let me remind myself of things that I should be thinking about as I'm building things, is, to me, that's worth its weight.
Yeah, that's really the selling point of this book to me. The system is fine. Everything else is fine. If I was a brand new GM, I would absolutely run this. For me, I probably never will, but there's cool things in here. The last thing in here I want to talk about that I thought was freaking fantastic, and I actually do want to run this. I just wouldn't run it in Index Card RPG. I'd run it in some other system, is Ghost Mountain. And I'm just going to read sort of the excerpt they have here at the front of Ghost Mountain. Ghost Mountain, this here's purgatory. It's unclear how, but Ghost Mountain is caught between earth, heaven, and hell. The dead aren't dead. Folk are beginning to change, and every night the devil threatens to burn it all. How did folks get here? Was it revenge, a terrible death, or a foolish vow? Are they dead, demonic, angelic, or lost? Will folks ascend, become devils, or just dissipate on the wind? Is there any salvation for the people here? What will you do about it? These are the questions that haunt those trapped in purgatory, trapped on Old Ghost Mountain.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's basically, they have a map of it, and it's just sort of like a floating section of the Old West that's been ripped out of the earth with a mountain in the middle of it. You're some sort of a cowboy or something that's trapped there, and good deeds and bad deeds, and it goes into a little more detail of it, but good deeds and bad deeds actually matter. So there is a dark red sun that sits on the horizon that's almost setting, and the more bad deeds are done, the closer it comes to setting. And nobody really knows what happens if that sun sets.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the line from Lord of the Rings where Legolas says, a red sun rises, someone's died tonight. And you just think about that for a second. People die every fucking night. It would always be red every morning.
It's still it's a cool line though, and a cool setting.
It makes no sense.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
He's just a nepo elf baby. That's all. Just repeating stuff his dad said.
So yeah, that's
based on the old. There's an old like sailors thing or something about a red sun and blah blah. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I've heard my friends talk about it. But yeah, there's an old saying about something that has to do with that old mariners and stuff. It's the folk with a C used to say about it. Yeah. It's a superstition based on good time to sail or not a good time to sail.
But yeah, that as a setting is something I would absolutely end up running a game about.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome.
I don't know what system I'd run it in. Boot Hill maybe. Boot Hill if I want to kill all the characters.
There's a DCC Weird West setting.
There is there?
There is.
Not an official one.
Oh, it's like a partnered third party. It's called like Weird Frontiers or something.
Yeah. Okay, it's I know I've seen that. Weird Frontiers RPG, but I don't think it's DCC because they only have 3 official DCC settings, as far as I'm aware of. I've never seen any others.
But yeah, I definitely recommend any dungeon master. Like Index Card RPG is cool as a simplified system to kind of onboard players into tabletop RPGs. But for me, the value is in the DM's guide. Even as an experienced DM, I read through it and was like, oh yeah, like there's stuff in there that you've probably thought about and that you've most likely done. But this kind of codifies it in a way that you're probably not thinking about as you're prepping games and doing things. It kind of gives you a lot of interesting things to think about in a way to consider how to structure things. So I think it's super useful as a DM.
Yeah. So there you have it. Index Card RPG. If you're a game master, look for it. Find a copy. Well worth it.
Or just find some index cards and write your own.
I do that too. So you guys have any other specific topics? If not, we can talk about a couple other things I've got.
I do have one thing I can talk about.
Yeah, I got a couple more. Mine are horror stories though, so Kristian, you go first.
Yeah. Save those for next week, Chris.
This is a book I got in recently. It was a Kickstarter I backed, and I got the physical book in finally. It's from Mage Hand Press. It's called the Book of Extinction. And this is a monster book, but it's an interesting monster book because now they do have some like species and players options, but that's not what I'm here to talk about because the meat of this book is it takes a bunch of real world extinct creatures and it gives you you usually get about a page or half of a page of information about literally the real world creature, what it is, where it was found in the world, and some of the things that led to its extinction. And they give you, for most of the cases, they give you stats for that real world creature, but then they do a fantasy version of inspired by that whatever that real world creature is, and then give you stats and lore and stuff for fantasy creature based off of that extinct creature.
Okay, that's a cool concept.
Yeah, it starts off with like the aurochs, like big cows, big wild cattle in Europe, and it gives you some like real history of them and stats. But then they're like, here's our inspired by it. We have the Briar Bull, which is a kind of a fey-like creature that roams protects the woods, and then the Hell Cow. An infernal bull that
I've beat those things up in Diablo for years.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really neat that they partnered with some like scientific organizations stuff to get information so they could get some real world kind of history on like different extinct species.
I'm actually on their website looking at the book, and one of the things they have on there is the passenger pigeon. Yep. Followed by the feathered tide, and it's just a bunch of passenger pigeons with red glowing eyes that are terrifying.
Yeah, there's some great art into it, but it's just I love a good monster book, and this was a really interesting take on one. And I love the actual real world information. For me, is fun to read and learn. You get to learn something cool, but then you also get some sweet fantasy stat blocks for 5e. But there's fun stuff.
Discuss how the dodo died.
They do have the dodo in here. They have I'm looking now at the Caribbean monk seal, so they turn into the fantasy creature of a monk seal, meaning a seal that is a monk.
Oh no. Next thing you know, that seal starts taking subclasses, elemental monk or shadow monk.
It's got stunning flipper, and it just slaps you and stuns you.
That's flipper.
The worst.
I love
that's the worst.
But yeah, it was a really neat book, and I was actually, this is one that took a while to get here, but I am, and I'm not really doing a lot of 5e stuff anymore, but I do love a good monster book, and this is a really cool book to read through. You learn real information, so you get to learn, which, I'm a nerd, I like to learn things.
Yeah.
But then you get some really cool monsters, and they've done a pretty good job with these monsters of some of them are like, okay, I can see how you got there, and some of them is like, where did that come from? But they're all cool monsters to use, and so you get some new stuff you can throw on players. Like this one that is the sea mink, and their inspired monster. You know what a mink is, a little like mongoose ottery type creature.
Wait, they're extinct?
Their inspired thing, the sea mink is, I guess.
Minks are not. The sea mink probably is.
But their inspired creature is the skin taker.
Oh. I see how they got there.
Which is an undead creature that that skins its prey and collects their hides and wears them.
Yeah, no, I absolutely see exactly how they got there.
Yeah. So you get some fun stuff here. It's got some really neat ideas in here.
That's cool. I like that.
What's the animal they use to make paintbrushes out of?
Horses?
No, it's some like mink ferret thing. But like it's hard to get the brushes nowadays because, animal cruelty and all that stuff, but some companies still sell those. I was just thinking, I know it's not extinct, but my mind immediately erased this some kind of weird mink-like creature that can like paint you and take your soul.
Yeah, if you figure it out, you can write that creature up. Yeah. Like I know most paintbrushes are just horsehair or some synthetic version thereof these days.
Yeah, but if you're running 5e stuff and you want some new monsters and you actually like to, learn interesting things, like this is a really cool book to have and read through and get to learn about some real world animals, and then also have a bunch of terrifying new monsters to throw at your players.
The cool thing about even 5e monster books, even if I'm not running 5e, those stats are generally pretty easy to convert to something else.
Yeah, so, if you're running any kind of D20 kind of adventure game, you can convert the stuff pretty easily.
Yeah, like one of the books that came with the Caverns of Thracia I got was a monsters book, and it had the 5e stats and the DCC stats there side by side in the book. So
nice.
Yep, real easy to make those conversions.
Yeah, conversion is like one of the things that I will use AI to do too now, and it can definitely do it fairly easily.
Yeah, you enjoy that.
Listen, AI is not going away, so find the mundane tasks that suck and have it do those.
Yeah, but those. I don't think that's not a mundane task that sucks. That's something I would enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Running a math formula? You enjoy running math formulas?
No, I do enjoy creating monsters by taking it an inspired idea from one system and building it in the system I want to run.
I didn't say create monsters. I said just convert.
Yeah.
Even converting it, I would still rather do that myself. I think that's fun to try to build that in the system whatever system it is that I want to run. I would much rather do that myself.
It comes down to, like I was talking about with writing it on the index cards. I'm then going to have a much better understanding of that monster. I'm going to know what it can do, and I'm also going to be less likely to forget the shit it can do because I had to write it down.
I think building monsters, whether you're converting them into a new system or creating them from scratch, is more of an art than a science, and that's just not it's not where AI shines.
I don't think it's an art converting
I
monsters,
disagree.
because you can see the 1-for-1 scaling to for monsters. Like, how to calculate a monster's hit points and whatnot. So you know what a CR of a monster is, you know what the range is, and there's always like little
The numbers
flourishes you can give something.
numbers wise, yeah, that's you can easily say that's not an art. But then you get into the abilities of things, and they do not always translate perfectly, and a lot of times you have to get creative.
Yep. What you're trying
Yes.
to replicate is not the numbers really, but the feel of that monster, the place it occupies in the world, and what its abilities mean. So that's why I say it is an art to convert them and build them. It is something you want to do yourself because you wanted to occupy that same feeling. The numbers are whatever. Like
Yep.
you don't need to worry about the numbers. That is easy, which is another reason you don't need to use freaking AI to do it. It's not hard.
Yeah, but when I can just give it a website and say, hey, convert this entire website up and update it to 5th edition 2014 rules, and it does it in 2.5 seconds, and I can focus my creativity elsewhere, I'm going to do that.
To each their own, you know.
Sure, you do you.
Make my life easier.
That's our problem these days. Everything's too easy.
Yep.
So I'm very sad Dan isn't here for this next topic, because he's sort of our riffs guy, RIFTS, Palladium games. Because I ran it a few times back in the 90s. I played it a handful of times. I love the setting, but I'm not super in depth with it. But so apparently there is a Riffs video game that exists called Riffs Promise of Power. And it came out in 2005, and it was on a system called the N-Gage, N-Gage, which I had never freaking heard of before. So I had to go
familiar.
I had to go looking at this thing. N-Gage was a handheld gaming / phone system put out by Nokia in 2003.
Yes, I remember this now.
Do you? Okay, because I had never seen this thing before. And Rift's Promise of Power was a video game that they actually put out. It's Final Fantasy Tactics-esque. It uses action points to move around. It kind of looks like Final Fantasy Tactics. Actually had pretty decent reviews overall. And people used to play this game, and then Nokia canceled the Engage, and then they canceled their online service for Engage, which I think made Rift's Promise of Power unplayable. Because that's a thing that happens. So I only know about this because I had a backer kit come across my feed that launching in 15 days is Rift's Promise of Power Reforged, where they're going to remake the game for actual video game systems.
That's cool.
Oh yeah.
It's probably vaporware now, so anyone has license to it. So
I mean, it's Palladium that's remaking it. So that's who owns Rifts. So, but yeah, they're going to put it out. They're going to put it out for PC and consoles. I don't know the extent, if it's just a pure remake or if they're going to add more stuff to it. Like I just don't have all those details, obviously. But this is something I will follow and might even consider backing, because I love Rifts and I would love to see it in video game form.
Yeah. Is it co-op so we can play it on stream?
I couldn't even begin to tell you. I hope so. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be, because it does use the action points thing, but the kind of top-down view, it wouldn't be too god-awful different from playing Solasta if it was up to 4 players.
Yeah.
But this thing's not coming out for a few years at least, if it even gets out of the gates. But let's hope.
I mean, does it have funding already or no?
It goes live in 15 days. So no.
Oh, I thought I had 15 days left. Oh, okay.
No. Yep. But I'll keep an eye on it and see what happens. If it funds or when it comes out, we can talk a little more about it once Dan's back.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to be very grumpy when he comes back from vacation, guys. It's going to be weird.
He's been at the beach. Beach sucks, right?
It does suck.
It does not.
Sand gets everywhere, and there's birds and the fucking whaling ships that keep trying to harpoon you.
Yep.
What beach are you hanging out on?
And well, for
every beach that I've ever gone to,
beach.
A whaling ship has just like beached itself trying to harpoon me to get all my blubber.
So last topic I wanted to talk about, and I'm not going to talk very long about it because we'll wait to really dig in before or when Dan gets back. But the
Alara, just like glossed over that.
What's that? Did I fade out?
No, you just glossed over the fact that I have a whaling harpoon ship chase me down the beaches.
We're
just going to ignore that.
I am going to just keep going and ignore that. There's nothing else to say about it. But I wanted to talk about alarums and excursions briefly, which I had never heard of until Dan posted it today. Maybe it was yesterday, whatever. And apparently alarms and excursions is an amateur press association thing that has been around since 1975, which focused on role-playing games specifically. And I'd never heard of the Amateur Press Association either, but apparently they've been around since the 60s, focused on sci-fi, fantasy, and stuff like that. And apparently the alarms and the APA started going towards role-playing games too much in like 74, 75. So they had a split and made alarms and excursions so that APA could focus on what it was on. And then the A&E, alarms and excursions, could focus on the role-playing game aspect of it. And apparently it's some sort of a zine type thing where people write in, contribute, and then they would release this as a magazine publication. I don't know how often they were doing it, once a year, once a month. I haven't seen that information. But
if magazines were a thing,
I think it's monthly. And from the way I understood it, and I could be wrong, I'll dive deeper into this between
it does. Yeah, it does seem to be monthly.
Is that it was they would actually grab and collate several other people's zines, so people that would write in their own small zines, and they would grab several of them, put them all together, edit them, kind of clean them up, and then put in some of her own stuff, and then publish it all as alarums and excursions.
Yeah. Yep. And the only reason this even popped up on our feed is because apparently they're ending it after 50 years of publishing this thing.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame. Yeah. It was put out by the publisher's name, self-published by Lee Gold.
Lee Gold, who she has been one of the more important people in early Dungeons and Dragons, because before the internet, people would use kind of these APAs and stuff, and these small things was where people would write questions about role-playing games and war games and all that kind of stuff and it would be letters, and some of these would be like letters and people responding to other letters in the previous month's issue of either questions or concerns or how something was done or that kind of thing. And so that's where a lot of kind of this early kind of fleshing out of how do you actually play this game was done.
Man, the internet killed everything.
It really kind of did. It killed a lot of stuff. I mean, the internet was great for a lot of things, but it also killed off a lot of creativity in those regards.
Yep. Blessing and a curse.
Yep.
Such is
the way of things. Yes, AI, very much so. It is a blessing and a curse.
Mostly a curse.
Yeah.
Mostly a curse. I have to agree.
Probably, but wait 20 years and see if if the robots start taking over the earth, and then we'll say curse absolutely.
Yeah. Once they start traveling through time to eliminate us, and we're waiting for Sarah Connor.
The best AI thing I've seen so far was someone posted that they bought a screen protector for their new iPhone, and the screen protector on the box said that it was AI enabled. The screen protector.
Yeah.
It has no technology.
Yeah, I would hope it's just a piece of plastic, but
how it learns your fingerprints.
Yeah.
Steals your data. Yeah, I saw that too, that Facebook is going to start making AI meta profiles to basically have you be friends with them. And so they can like pitch you products and stuff like that, but on a friendly way, you know. I just know that's what NPCs and everything's going to devolve into here soon.
I mean, everything already sends you ads based on everything you freaking do. Like anything you search for, anything. I can't tell you how many times I've had ads pop up on YouTube because I talked about something on this podcast.
Yeah, they're listening for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, it absolutely is.
Yep. That's why I throw money at the EFF every month.
What? What's the EFF?
The Electronic Frontiers Foundation. They fight for open source things and internet privacy protections.
Oh, okay. Yep, that's a good thing.
Yep.
There's a reason I use the Brave browser, even though
I was going to say I know what browser you use and I know why.
Yep. And even using it, it still doesn't. You know, I have to turn off everything if I really and truly want it to, you know, protect me from all that shit. But that's if you're going to use the internet, that's the way it is.
Run no script.
Yeah.
See, I just believe in the great computer EMP, which basically is an EMP that's going to happen in 2 years from now. That's going to wipe out all electronic data across the board, resetting us back to a pre-internet age.
I mean, I've seen Escape from LA. I know what Kurt Russell's up to.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going for. I'm going for that.
Oh, we can only hope. Yep. All right. I got nothing else. You guys have any last?
No, that sounds like a good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, okay. I guess so.
All right. Good. You can save your horror stories for next week or the week after or never.
No, we may have a special guest next week.
Ooh, fancy. But we're not going to talk about that till next week.
Yeah.
No.
You got to show up next week if you want to know.
That's right. All right. Later, guys. Bye, Craig.
Bye.